Okay, so you want to get a grasp on what's been going on with infrastructure in India.
Right.
And you've passed along this chapter from the Economic Survey 2023-24 called Infrastructure, Lifting Potential Growth.
Yeah.
Think of this deep dive as your sort of like crash course, I guess, on the main points from this chapter, with some interesting stats, and maybe even a few things that will make you want to learn more.
Exactly. We'll be kind of narrowing down this whole chapter. It's full of data, so we'll pick out the most important parts and highlight what's going to be the most helpful for you.
Okay, cool. So one of the first things that stood out to me when I was reading it was all the stuff about public spending.
Yeah.
Like, with all the talk about private investment and fancy new financing things,
Yeah.
it seems like the government is still really the one in control when it comes to funding for infrastructure.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how much the public sector is investing. You know, the chapter shows that the union government has actually increased their spending by like 2.2 times between fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2024.
Wow.
And the state governments aren't far behind. They've also bumped up their spending by 2.1 times in that same period. It's a big commitment for sure.
Definitely. But they also bring up this data issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
it seems like information about how infrastructure is being financed is all over the place with different agencies and everything.
Right.
So it makes it hard to get a complete picture.
Yeah, and it makes you think about transparency and accountability. You know, with the government focusing on getting their budget under control, can they actually keep spending this much on infrastructure over time?
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's get into the details. The report talks a lot about connecting the country physically. And of course, roads are a big part of that. They talk a lot about this Haratmala Pariyojana thing. And it seems like they're making good progress on expanding the national highway system.
Yeah, definitely. The speed of construction on national highways has actually tripled from fiscal year 2014 to fiscal year 2024.
Wow.
Which is incredible. They went from building 11.7 kilometers per day to like 34 kilometers per day.
Wow.
And they're not just building roads the old-fashioned way either. They're using new methods like making tolls digital and using materials that are better for the environment. It's clear they're thinking about efficiency and being eco-friendly.
That's great progress. But the report also talks about some problems, right?
Yeah.
Like delays in getting land
Yeah.
and this thing they call ribbon development along the highways.
Yeah, those are definitely issues. And you see those same problems with the railways, too. They're putting a ton of money into modernizing the railway system, like building those dedicated freight corridors and those new Vande Bharat express trains.
Oh, yeah?
But, you know, fixing up such a huge and old system is a massive job. It's going to take a lot of continuous work to keep up with how much everyone needs reliable transportation for people and goods.
It's like they're always trying to catch up with how much demand is growing. So what about water transport? That's not usually something people think of when they think about infrastructure.
You'd be surprised. Actually, the chapter talks about how they've expanded the capacity of major ports, and they highlight this Sagarmala program, which is all about modernizing ports and making them better connected.
Okay.
What's really interesting is how much they're focusing on developing the island's shipbuilding and promoting both coastal and inland water transport. They're really trying to use India's huge coastline and all those waterways to their advantage.
That makes sense. And that kind of leads us to civil aviation. The report says the government has invested a lot in airport infrastructure and that this UDAN scheme for regional connectivity is doing well. Are there any mentions of new technology or trends in that area?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They talk about how things like drones, aircraft leasing, and even the MRO industry, which is all about maintenance and repairs,
Right.
are growing. It seems like they really want India to be a big player in those areas globally. But they also mention that it's still a challenge to increase airport capacity and make the airline industry more efficient and, profitable.
So they're trying to be innovative, but they also have to deal with these basic problems of capacity and efficiency,
Yeah.
which seems to be a recurring theme.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's switch to energy infrastructure. It's a sector that's changing a lot everywhere, and it looks like India is right in the middle of it all.
Absolutely. The power sector is going through a major change in India. The chapter highlights how their power transmission grid is on its way to becoming one of the largest unified grids anywhere in the world, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's impressive. And I'm sure with the population growing so fast and the economy growing, the demand for electricity must be going through the roof.
You got it. The report talks about a bunch of different things they're doing to make the power distribution system work better and to make it more financially stable.
Uh-huh.
One that stands out is this thing called the Revamped Distribution Sector Scheme, or RDSS for short. And of course, they're pushing hard for saving energy with things like that UJL scheme to get people using energy-efficient LED lights. But the really big thing here is the focus on renewable energy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. India's been making a lot of noise about their goals for renewable energy. What does the report say about that?
Well, they're aiming to hit 500 GW of installed capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030.
Wow, that's a really ambitious goal.
Yeah.
I bet there are some big challenges in getting there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The report talks about a bunch of schemes and policies to try to make this shift to renewable energy happen, including this one called the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Uthan Mahavian, or PM Kusum for short.
Okay.
And there's also the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme for solar PV modules and the National Green Hydrogen Mission, but they're not pretending it's going to be easy. They know there are big challenges in getting enough money, finding the land for these projects, and connecting renewable energy to the existing power grid.
It sounds like they have a lot to do, but it's clear they're serious about renewable energy.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about social and economic infrastructure. It's something that doesn't always get enough attention, but it's really important for overall development.
Totally. And in this area, the report highlights the achievements of the Swachh Bharat Mission Grameen and the Jal Jeevan Mission.
Okay.
They've made great progress in getting sanitation to more people and giving them access to tap water, especially in rural areas.
That's really good to hear.
Right.
Were there any specific examples in this section that stood out to you?
Yeah, there were a couple. The report mentions this Barthan Bank thing in Telangana.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple idea, but it's effective. They provide steel utensils for community events so people don't have to use so much plastic. And then there's the Silam Model Village in Mizoram, which shows how when a community works together and they're smart about water management, they can turn a village that doesn't have enough water into one that does. It's inspiring to see this kind of innovation at the local level.
That's really cool. It's a good reminder that innovation doesn't have to be high-tech.
Yeah.
Sometimes the simplest solutions make the biggest difference.
Exactly.
So what about urban infrastructure? With so many people moving to cities all the time, I imagine this is a big area of focus.
It is. They talk about this housing for all vision and highlight the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, or PMAY, which is about affordable housing.
Right.
And then there are things like the Affordable Rental Housing Complexes, or ARHCs, and the Smart Cities Mission, or SCM. All these are aimed at improving how cities are planned and making them better places to live.
It sounds like they're trying to make cities that are more sustainable and more livable. I'm sure transportation is a big part of that, too.
Absolutely. They talk about how they're expanding metro rail networks in a lot of cities. They definitely see good urban transportation as a key part of their infrastructure strategy.
That makes sense. So we've covered a lot, from roads and railways to renewable energy and smart cities. Anything else important about social or economic infrastructure that we should mention before we move on?
Yeah, there are a couple more things. They highlight some programs to boost the tourism industry,
Okay.
like developing pilgrimage and heritage sites through the Purhaj A scheme and improving tourist destinations with this revamped Swadesh Darshan 2.0 scheme.
Interesting. So tourism is definitely on their radar, which makes sense. It would be a huge boost for the economy.
Right.
So what about those big things that always get a lot of attention, like space exploration and digital infrastructure?
Oh, yeah, those are in there too. They talk about how much progress India has made in its space program with things like Chandrayaan-3 and the development of new rockets. And there's something new happening here, which is that the private sector is getting more involved in the space industry, which could change things a lot.
That's really interesting. And finally, digital infrastructure. It's so important in the world today, and it seems like India is really embracing it.
They are. They're talking about using digital tech in all sorts of infrastructure projects. And they highlight things like the Bharat project to get broadband internet to more people, and this building information modeling, or BIM, which is all about using computer models to make construction more efficient.
Right.
They clearly see technology as a key part of making India ready for the future.
So we've gotten a good overview of all these big infrastructure goals that India has, spanning all these different sectors and with a lot of focus on innovation. So what's your first impression? What really stands out to you from all of this?
You know, what gets me is just how big and ambitious their plans are.
Yeah.
They're not just, thinking about roads and bridges. It's like they're looking at infrastructure as this big way to make the economy grow, make life better for people, and even tackle climate change.
Yeah.
It's a pretty comprehensive approach.
Yeah, it's like they're building this foundation for India's future and trying to deal with all these challenges at the same time. But let's be real, nothing this big is easy. The report mentions a bunch of hurdles like getting land, finding skilled workers, and getting more private companies involved.
Exactly. And that makes you wonder, can India actually get past these roadblocks and reach its full potential when it comes to infrastructure?
Yeah.
It seems like they're pushing for everyone to work together, the government, private companies, and even local communities to find solutions.
That collaboration thing is interesting. They actually point out a few examples in the report where getting communities involved was really important for infrastructure projects to succeed,
Yeah.
like that Salem village in Mizoram we talked about before.
Mhm.
It shows that it's not just about building stuff. It's about building in a way that helps the people who are supposed to benefit from it.
And about getting private companies more involved, the report says that just relying on government money might not be enough in the long run.
Yeah.
It's happening all over the world. Governments are looking to private investors to help pay for these huge infrastructure projects.
So what's stopping private companies from investing more in India's infrastructure?
Mm.
Is it just that they think it's too risky, or is there something else going on?
Well, the report says that India needs to make it easier for investors to do business there,
Uh-huh.
like simplifying how projects are structured, figuring out how to share risks, and getting rid of some of the regulations. They basically need to make it easier for investors to come in, see the opportunities, and feel good about putting their money in.
So it's not just about building more. It's about building smarter in a way that's better for the environment and with the right partners. And speaking of the environment, we can't ignore climate change. Do they say anything about how they're making sure their infrastructure plans are good for the planet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're really stressing the importance of being sustainable in every part of infrastructure development. We see this in how much they're focusing on renewable energy, using environmentally friendly materials for roads, and even in how they're managing water. It's good to see that sustainability isn't just an afterthought, it's a core principle.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So remember that data problem we talked about before about how there isn't one central place to get all the info about infrastructure financing?
Right.
It seems like that comes up a lot in the report.
It does. They really emphasize how important it is to improve the way they collect data and make reports.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a clear picture of where the money's going and how projects are progressing, it's hard to know if policies are working and to make good decisions.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but you're missing some of the pieces.
Exactly. And this lack of transparency can scare away investors too. They need reliable information to know what the risks and rewards are. And if they don't have that, they're more likely to hold back.
So being transparent is really important, not just for the government to make good policies, but also to attract that private investment they need. So let's change gears a bit and talk about opportunities. Even with all the challenges, the report is pretty optimistic about the future of infrastructure in India. What are some of the big opportunities they see?
Well, one of the most promising areas is using digital tech. We've already seen this with the Bharat project for broadband internet and using building information modeling in construction.
Yeah, it's clear that technology is changing everything, making infrastructure development faster, cheaper, and more sustainable.
And the report says that India is in a good position to take advantage of all these advances and use them even more in their infrastructure projects. It's not just about using tech that already exists, it's about being innovative and developing their own solutions.
So it's about being a leader in digital infrastructure, not just following what others are doing. What other opportunities do they see?
Another big one is focusing on sustainability. Like we talked about, India is already doing a lot with renewable energy and sustainable materials.
Yeah.
But the report goes further. It says India could become a global leader in sustainable infrastructure and set an example for other developing countries to follow.
That's a bold idea. But it makes sense given how vulnerable India is to climate change and how committed they are to addressing it.
Exactly. And by showing what they're doing right in terms of sustainable infrastructure, they can attract international collaboration and get more funding, which helps them make even more progress. It's a win-win. They get to solve their own problems and contribute to global sustainability efforts at the same time.
That's great that they're thinking on a global scale, but let's not forget the economic benefits closer to home. Infrastructure development can create jobs, boost the economy, and improve people's lives.
You got it. The report highlights how much potential there is for creating jobs, especially in rural areas, and it talks about the ripple effect on all these different sectors of the economy. Infrastructure isn't just about billing things. It's about building a more prosperous and equitable future for everyone.
Yeah, it's like this positive chain reaction spreading economic benefits all over.
And the report says that India can really unlock this economic engine if they address the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. It's a story of ambition, challenges, and opportunities.
Mm.
A nation that's really working hard to build a better future peace by digital peace.
A story that's still being written. This chapter from the Economic Survey has given us a really thorough look at what's happening with infrastructure in India. But it's not just a bunch of data. It's a story that shows India's hopes, struggles, and determination to build a brighter future.
And it's a story that we're all part of in a way because infrastructure is really about connecting communities and possibilities.
And this deep dive has given us a front row seat to watch India's big infrastructure vision unfold. So before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, where we'll look at some specific projects, what are your main takeaways? What really stuck with you? I think for me, it's that they're trying to be so holistic.
Right.
It's not just like, okay, let's build roads and bridges over here. It's about creating this whole system of infrastructure that helps the economy, helps society, and is good for the environment all at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And how they're using technology in all of this is really impressive.
Yeah.
It's not just like an afterthought or something they added on later. It's becoming like a core part of how they're thinking about infrastructure.
Exactly. And that leads us to the last part of the report where they actually get into specific examples of how they're making projects happen and dealing with problems. I'm excited to hear about these practical solutions because that's where all these big ideas actually turn into real progress.
Well, one of the first things they talk about is the National Infrastructure Pipeline, or NIP. It's like a central hub where they track and review all these infrastructure projects across different sectors.
Okay.
It's supposed to make things more transparent and attract more investment.
So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for everything related to infrastructure.
Exactly.
So potential investors can see what the opportunities are and how things are going. That's smart.
It is. And it's not just about showing off projects. The NIP also helps them figure out where there might be problems early on, and it gets different government agencies to work together better.
That's really important because those bureaucratic holdups and lack of coordination can really slow things down.
Yeah.
What else are they doing to overcome those kinds of challenges?
They talk about this project monitoring group, or PMG. It's basically like a special task force that helps get projects approved faster and deals with any regulatory issues.
So they're like a problem-solving team cutting through the red tape and making sure things move forward. Do they have any data on how effective this group has been?
Yeah. They do. The report says that the PMG has helped resolve thousands of issues for projects worth like tons of money. It sounds like they're really making a difference.
That's good to hear. But it's not just about fixing problems. It's about planning ahead and making sure everything works together from the beginning. What are they doing about that?
That's where this thing called the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan comes in, or PNCS-NMP for short. This is a whole new way of thinking about planning that's all about coordinating different types of infrastructure.
Wait, multimodal infrastructure? What does that even mean?
Basically, it means connecting different ways of getting around, like roads, railways, waterways, and airways, so that everything is linked together and people and goods can move around efficiently.
So it's not just about building separate roads or railways. It's about making sure they all connect in a smart way to create a better transportation system.
Exactly. And the PMGS-NMP uses technology to make this integration happen. They use data analytics and mapping to figure out the best routes, avoid disruptions, and make sure resources are used effectively.
It's like they're creating a virtual model of India's entire infrastructure system and then using that model to plan and build things better.
That's a great way to think about it. And the report says that the PMGS-NMP is helping them approve projects faster, reduce costs, and minimize the impact on the environment. It's a really comprehensive approach.
It sounds like it's really changing the game. Is it only for infrastructure projects, though?
Actually, they mentioned that they're also using the PMGS-NMP for planning in areas like healthcare and education. They're combining data from different government departments to figure out where there are gaps and how to address them.
That's really interesting. It's like they're taking a holistic approach to development using technology and data to create a system where everything works together more smoothly.
Right. And talking about integrated development, the report also talks about the National Logistics Policy, or NLP,
Okay.
which goes hand in hand with the PMGS-NMP by focusing on making logistics smoother and cutting down on transportation costs.
So they're optimizing the whole supply chain from start to finish.
Exactly. The NLP is all about using data to make logistics better improving service quality standards, and providing training programs to build capacity. They want India to be more competitive on the global stage.
It's all fitting together this vision of an India where everything is connected and powered by digital technology. Are there any specific things under this NLP that you found interesting?
Yeah, one they highlight is the Unified Logistics Integrated Platform. It brings together all these different systems related to logistics and gives you real-time information about where cargo is moving, which makes things more transparent and efficient.
That's a perfect example of how they're using technology to their advantage. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Economic Survey 2023-24, I think it's important to remember that this is just a snapshot in time. We've seen what India wants to do with infrastructure, but the journey is far from over.
It's a constantly changing landscape, and it's going to be fascinating to see how India deals with the challenges and makes the most of the opportunities that come up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, here's something to think about. As India goes through this massive infrastructure transformation, what role do you see yourself playing?
Right.
Whether you're an investor, a business owner, or just a concerned citizen, we all have a part to play in shaping the future of infrastructure in India and around the world.
It's a team effort, and by having these kinds of discussions, supporting new ideas, and holding our leaders accountable, we can all help build infrastructure that's stronger, more sustainable, and fairer for generations to come.